Welcome to Aspen Ideas Climate Chicago. We are so thrilled to be here together in this great American city of resilience, innovation, and extraordinary spirit. Let me begin by expressing gratitude to the many partners who have made this summit possible. First, to our local host committee and civic leaders from across Chicago, Illinois, and the Midwest who are here. Thank you all for making this possible. Thank you to Governor J.B. Pritzker for his support of this summit and for taking part in our launch event this winter as well. To our partners at the University of Chicago, Willis Tower, and of course right here, this incredible facility, the Salt Shed. Thank you all very much. To the visionary co-creators of this gathering, Rachel Starr and Kobe Weinberg from C3, amazing young leaders. To another great Chicago leader, our Aspen Institute board chair, Margot Pritzker. And of course, to our outstanding team of the Aspen Institute, especially Executive Vice President Jin-Hee Kim, our Energy and Environment Program leaders, Greg Gershuni and Kitty Pollack. Thank you all. We at the Aspen Institute are so honored to bring Aspen Ideas Climate to the Midwest, a region that knows firsthand that climate change is not abstract. It's the power grid, it's the water system, it's the jobs we depend upon, it's our transportation system, it's the health of our neighborhoods, it's our future, and it's personal. The Aspen Institute is a global convening and leadership organization with a bold purpose. We exist to ignite human potential, to build understanding, and with that understanding, to create new possibilities for a better world. For 75 years, we've brought people together for dialogue and problem solving to help address society's greatest challenges, among them, of course, the escalating urgency of a changing climate. Aspen Ideas Climate Chicago reflects our core methodology, dialogue that drives progress. Over the next few days, we'll hear from scientists and governors, entrepreneurs and mayors, artists and activists. We'll explore bold ideas, innovative solutions, and pragmatic steps forward. And we'll do it with the conviction that a broad range of perspectives in conversation is essential to making change. It's also fitting, for a particular reason, that we've come to Chicago for this convening. You see, 75 years ago, the Aspen Institute was born out of the humanistic vision of Chicagoans Walter and Elizabeth Pepke, who believed that dialogue, open, informed, and inclusive, could help rebuild society after World War II. In 1949, they and a group of leaders journeyed west to Aspen, Colorado for a radical experiment. They gathered under one single tent, thousands of people, including leaders from the University of Chicago, with them to ask the biggest questions they could about the needs of their time. Not just questions of policy, important as that is, but questions of value. Today, we bring that same spirit back home to Chicago, to a city that knows full well how to turn vision into impact. And we invite you to carry that spirit with you when you return home, wherever home may be, a few blocks away or a few thousand miles away. The true legacy of Aspen Ideas Climate Chicago won't be measured just in panels or plenaries. It will be measured in the projects we launch, the partnerships we forge, the momentum we carry forward. It is not just a conference, it is a launch pad. And that spirit of momentum really drives all of our Aspen Institute Ideas convenings. It's why I'm so pleased to announce today, in closing, the launch of our newest addition to the series of programs that we're offering. It will be called Aspen Ideas Economy, and it will take place October 20th and 21st in Newark, New Jersey. That gathering will focus on building an economy that works for all, elevating bold ideas and real-world solutions to expand opportunities and shared prosperity. We'll be thinking about these topics holistically and applying the lens, for sure, of climate and energy to those economic questions. Thank you again for all who made Aspen Ideas Climate Chicago possible. To each of you for showing up with your passion, your experience, your hopes, and your energy. Let's all rise to meet the moment together. Thank you for being here.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our lightning round panel in which we will take on the small subject of climate action in a polarized world in 18 minutes or less. I love the urgency. So let's start. Ambassador Andre Correa del Lago, the world's two superpowers, the United States and China, are pulling the world in two very different directions. The US doubling down on oil and gas, China selling its solar panels, its wind turbines, its batteries, its electric vehicles on 2 wheels and 4 wheels. All of this China is selling to the world. How does the rest of the world manage this divergence by the world's two superpowers? What opportunities does it present, particularly for emerging economies, and what risks does it present?
Well, first of all, thank you. I'm very excited to be here. And in fact, it's not the US that has this policy. It's the US central government that has this policy. I think that most of the US is still following and is saying very clearly that Paris mattered to them. So, the US is very welcome in Belém at COP30. And we think that there is so much that we can do, because one thing are the negotiations, and most of the negotiations have already happened. The other thing is implementation. In implementation, you need local governments, you need state governments, you need business, you need universities, you need civil society. And this is what we need to do. I think that the world is a bit tired of seeing those negotiations and not seeing the continuation after these negotiations. And so I think that we have to talk to the actors that will implement. And I think that many are here.
I want to get to some of the COP specifics in a little while, but Arunabha Ghosh, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how do emerging economies especially negotiate these two divergent directions? What opportunities does it present for them? What risks does it present for a country like India, for example?
Well, let me add my thanks to Aspen for inviting me here. I think from the point of view of opportunity, the clear issue is we are representing geographies that are some of the fastest growing economies in the world. To drive those economies, you need energy. And when you look at the energy systems, the sun shines the most between the tropics. So the point is, in India, for instance, some of the latest auctions are showing that renewables plus storage gives you power at a cost cheaper than new coal. So that's the opportunity, and that's why just last week, India has reached its NDC target of 2030, 5 years in advance, of more than 50% of its electricity capacity coming from non-fossil sources. Now, that's the opportunity. The risk, however, is that events around the globe create a sense of anxiety, whether it's in supply chains, whether it's in critical minerals, whether it's the direction of policy, whether it's the cost of finance. And that's what emerging economies are constantly worried about. It's not the direction of travel, it's the pace of travel. So if we can figure out, as Ambassador Correa del Lago was just saying, it's no longer about setting ambition, but figuring out the nuts and bolts, which is often at the local level. It's about unblocking those supply chain blockages. Then actually the momentum is very much behind the emerging economies, And they will set the example for the others to follow.
What example could they set? What would that look like?
One part of this is, of course, the energy transition. I've already told you about India, but think about Vietnam. It's not the largest economy in Southeast Asia, but it has the most renewable energy deployment. You think about Namibia in sub-Saharan Africa, and think about Uruguay in South America. These are all countries and economies that are demonstrating the energy transition leapfrog. But beyond that comes industrial policy. India has just come out with the first green steel taxonomy anywhere in the world. It's the world's second largest steel producer. It's trying to set a pathway for how that can be cleaner and greener. Think about electric vehicles. Right? India sold 1.9 million electric vehicles last year. 94% of those were two-wheelers, three-wheelers. All the subsidies for electric vehicles are for public transport. So it's not just about from gasoline vehicles to electric vehicles. It's what is the transport system that is more sustainable. Those are the kinds of examples that emerging markets have to demonstrate.
Jennifer Morris, in this very polarized world, what are the tangible opportunities for collaboration to protect nature? Whether that's within a country, across political divides, or among countries.
Thank you so much for that question. And I want to add to my thanks. I love that this event is in Chicago. To really celebrate this community, the innovation, the youth that we have in this room is just incredibly inspiring. And I love that this is being held in the Midwest to show the leadership that a Midwest state like Illinois can have. So let me give you an example. And let me just start by saying, and this will be very brief, but let me just start by saying that we can do all the transformation in India, in the United States, in China, and go 100% net neutral in the cars that we drive and 100% in the manufacturing. But if we don't fix how we produce food, how we treat our forests, our wetlands, our peat systems, if we don't change that, 30% of the solution will be lost. So our goal at the Nature Conservancy is really to focus on what's often that forgotten solution of nature. Now we do this in 3 ways, and I'm going to take you quickly to a place. I was in Argentina last week. Argentina in a region called the Chaco in northern Argentina. And there's really 3 elements to every strategy around this. One is to fix our food systems, to transform some of the most destructive food systems on planet Earth for climate and for nature, and that is soy and cattle. And in this region, which is the second largest forest in the entire South America, after, of course, the Amazon, highest rates of deforestation in northern Argentina, this area is being transformed from soy and cattle. So how do we fix this? How do we have these radical collaborations that fix food systems while also protecting the most critical nature that we have left for carbon storage and for biodiversity? And finally, how do we create and foment the policy drivers, the markets, and the finance that will get down to the people and the communities who need it most?
What does this collaboration look like, though?
Yes.
Argentina is a big soy producer.
Yes.
That soy is exported to China,
Yes.
mostly for the livestock
Yes.
industry. Argentina is also a major cattle producer.
Yes, exactly. So let's.
what is being done on the ground? Take
Yes.
us there.
So, for example, so you're right. So the largest producer of processed soy is coming from Argentina and going to the European market, going to China. And what is happening right now, our collaboration is specifically with the soy producers. So the soy producers said, look, we have this new regulation called the European regulation that is requiring deforestation-free soy. And we've got a lot of deforestation. How do we address this? So we have been collaborating with them specifically on the ground, working with farmers on providing the right tools, the techniques, the right enforcement systems, the transparency of where the soy is coming from to make sure they can guarantee to the European buyer that that soy is coming from a deforestation-free site. And really critically, and we often forget this, how are they going to pay for it? These transitions often take time. We need to have the patient finance, the right types of capital to actually give the farmers, the producers, the ranchers what they need to make that transition.
I mean, this is all very, it can be very controversial on the ground. In Ghana and Ivory Coast, for example, chocolate farmers, cacao farmers face some of these same requirements. And they say, this is the way we make a living producing a commodity whose price goes up and down. The same could be said for the steel rules, right? The European Union is imposing new rules about carbon embedded in steel production. So this can be very tricky for global north countries to be imposing some of these requirements on countries that really haven't been responsible for the carbon pollution historically.
Well, if I could jump into that, I think yes, however, what we're seeing on the ground, whether it's in West Africa, Southern Africa, Indonesia, or in South America, is that these regulations actually make sense for the farms. They're creating resiliency of better soil production, no-till agriculture, for example, which has been done in Argentina for a long time. They're seeing more productive soils as a result. They're able to reduce costs. So it's not just about an environmental regulation. This is about on-farm management. They can use less water, which can be expensive in some countries, and they can also have benefits of keeping forests standing, whether that's payments from the government through an ecosystem services project, from carbon markets and other types of facilities. So long-term, it absolutely makes sense. However, you can't force them to do it overnight, especially without the long-term contracts and the financing to make that a reality.
We're going to fast forward to COP30. In a few months, thousands of people, how many thousands are coming to Berlin?
50.
50 coming to Berlin. Okay. The US may not send a delegation. It certainly didn't to Bonn in the pre-COP talks. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, I think that
Are you
since
relieved?
Since the US decided to leave the Paris Accord, there's not much sense to be very active during the negotiations in Berlin. I think that it's going to be an opportunity for all the other countries to have a new reconfiguration. But if you think that 70 or 60% of the American economy is going to look at Paris as a reference, I think that the consequences are less worrying than they could be. But coming back to what you were saying, I think that this issue of how will we convince people to do the right thing, I believe that Berlin, we are going to try to show very much the economic argument. We need to implement. We have already negotiated most things, and we need to implement. And the implementation is much more simple than the negotiation because, as you know, the negotiation is by consensus. So, and the implementation, each country has one advantage or another. But I believe very much that if you strengthen the economic argument, Texas is such an important producer of renewable energy. It's because the price is good. And the same thing can apply also for agriculture and for preservation. That's why I believe that in Berlin, we're going to have really the strongest link between nature and climate that was ever done at any COP.
I'm going to rewind a little bit on what you said. The absence of the US may not be as worrying, as you said. It might provide a platform for a new configuration among countries. What does that look like? Who leads that new configuration?
I think that if we are concentrating on implementation, this is not as relevant as it was in the negotiations. We have negotiated a lot, and we have reached many advances, I think, in Dubai with the GST. So I think that we can have a COP of solutions. We would really love to have a COP of solution of examples because it's been 10 years of Paris. We look at what happened in China. I mean, China moved completely from a country that looked very reluctant to invest in renewables, in electric cars, etc., to be the absolute leader. And there is a huge debate about trade, for instance, because once they do the right products, these products now have to pay tariffs when they are exported. So it is a very important debate, but it is a debate concentrated on implementation and involving all the other organizations. It cannot be something absolutely limited to the climate change negotiating.
Yes.
I don't think climate leadership is a crown that only one country wears. And I think what Berlin can do is shine the spotlight on different regions where the action is happening, whether it's on nature, whether it's in the energy transition, whether it's on sustainable cities. But I think two different aspects of the political economy now needs attention. We are getting into the next phase of climate action. One part of this is linking climate action to more informed and rational industrial policy. We can't keep building protectionist barriers in our major economies. If we have more interdependent value chains, it actually brings our economies closer together. That's one. The second is bringing the energy transition closer to communities. In India, while we have very large utility-scale solar projects, we also have a program which is the world's largest solar irrigation projects for smallholder farmers. We also have a program which was launched last year for 10 million homes to get rooftop solar. Already within a year, 1.1 million homes have got it. When you bring the energy transition closer to communities, you realize there's a different mantra, which is not economy versus the environment, but jobs, growth, and sustainability.
I want to rewind to what you said about Dubai. In Dubai 2.5 years ago, at that COP, there was a very, very important agreement made to, quote, transition away from fossil fuels in a just, orderly, and equitable manner, end quote. Now, is that still a realistic North Star for this COP, considering the expansion of fossil fuels that we are seeing in the United States, in your own country, the expansion of oil, in India and in China, the expansion of coal? So does the transition away from fossil fuels, is that still a North Star?
Yes, it is. Definitely it is. That's the advantage of consensus. Everybody agreed on that. So now what we have to see is that each country will have a different transition because they have completely different circumstances. So how do we adjust these transitions to that commitment is, I believe, one of the great discussions.
Could there be a roadmap produced in this COP for
I think
that phase, not the phase out, the transition away from fossil
I have
fuels?
mixed feelings about that because these top-down things can be counterproductive. I think that the most important thing is for each country to incorporate the idea and present the solution. We all know that Paris was designed in this way, that countries have to be stimulated to be ambitious. So I think that the same logic should apply to transition away from fossil fuels.
So no roadmap necessarily at this COP, but that goal, that hypothetical goal remains. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, and you know, as president of the COP, you have to listen to the others. And so let's see what the others come with. The important thing is to advance and to remember urgency. Urgency is what really should make us move. We have very few years. Science is confirming that we have very few years. So let's concentrate on what we can do as soon as possible, because everything that we do now counts much more than if you do it in 5 years or 10 years.
So this is the lightning round in the lightning round, okay? I've warned you that I'm going to ask you for a one-word response to the following question.
She didn't tell us the question, by the way.
Didn't tell you the prompt.
Starting with her.
Sure, we'll start with her.
This is where ladies first does not apply.
As we look back on this moment, just say 5 years from now, we're looking back at this moment, middle of 2025. What is the one word that you would like us to use to describe this moment?
One word.
One word.
Urgent.
Totally
Maybe I
agree.
did like that.
Pragmatic.
Science.
Yeah. Over.
Thank you for playing. Thank you, audience, for listening.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So I'm a musician, and last night I played in San Francisco for about 15,000 people, and I'm running on about 90 minutes of sleep, so forgive me if in the next 5 minutes I become a little bit unhinged as I'm talking about this. Or don't forgive me, no, it's okay. So I've spent a lot of time as a musician, but also I spent a lot of time in climate. I did my Ph.D. in human rights law and sustainable development. I worked on the Inflation Reduction Act. I worked with the UN on the SDGs. I run this organization called Planet Reimagined. And we do such a terrible job communicating to our audiences about climate. We do a horrendous job. Wow, an applause for talking about how bad we are at something? Okay. As a musician, that's what I spend so much of my time doing. When we're rolling out an album campaign, all I do is figure out how to reach people, how to figure out creative ways to get them engaged, how to take our merch line, our touring business, the way we work with commercials, the way we roll out albums is the same kind of thing we need to be thinking about as we're building this climate movement. Now, this climate movement is really in its third phase, right? One of my professors when I was an undergrad was a guy named Wally Broker. And if there are any scientists in the room, you probably know who that is. He's the guy who coined the term global warming. But we don't really use that term anymore, right? We use climate change. But I spent a bunch of time on the Harris campaign in the fall. And obviously that went incredibly well. When I was on the road, I did a lot of door knocking. And nobody that I spoke to wanted to speak about climate change. 1.5 degrees meant nothing to anybody. Nobody cared about renewable energy. Nobody cared about any of this stuff. They cared about making sure there was food on their kids' plates. They cared about how they got to and from work, how they got to and from school. They cared about the cost of what happens when they turned on and off the lights. All of that is climate change, and you all know that. But when we're trying to figure out who our audience is, a lot of the work that I've done both in Congress and in other places is thinking about how we get both Republicans and Democrats on board. When I'm working with Republicans, of course, I talk about the economy, I talk about jobs. I sell the same policy across the political spectrum using different language. At Planet Reimagined, we're building this incredible AI initiative now that can take a policy from any city in the world, generalize it, and then reapply it to any other regulatory environment. That's also about figuring out who the audience is. If we can take something that works in one place and apply it in other places, that's how we're gonna win in climate. And there are some people in the climate movement who are so good at communicating about these issues because they almost never talk about climate change. And I'm not saying that we should never talk about climate, but if we think about everything that we've heard over the last 6 months, actually no, make it a year, because I'm not just talking about the Trump administration. I'm not just talking about people who are telling us to move away from certain language. This was before that. This was on the Harris campaign, thinking about how to reach people who want to participate but don't really know what they should be doing. That's the language of the people that we need to be talking about. When I'm doing a show like I did last night, and I'm playing in front of people, I think about the emotion that I'm conveying. When we design a show, it's all about how can we take people through the positivity, how we can make people cry, how we can make people angry, and then how we can bring them back to a place of happiness. That storytelling, that narrative, is where we need to be moving in climate. And this third era of climate that I was talking about, from global warming to climate change, is really about how it impacts people directly. I'm not telling you that people should be taking small actions in their individual lives. Absolutely not. I'm done with straws. I'm done with pledges about whatever you're going to do in your day-to-day life. But what it is about is thinking about a reindustrialization of America and the world. It's about how we're getting our energy, how we're getting our food, how we're getting our water. Those things from all the polling across the country are what people care about. It really is what they give a shit about. Nobody cares about climate change anymore. People care about how it impacts them in their day-to-day lives. So I am calling for right now to meet people in the words that they will care about, which is a rethinking of climate using strategies from the music industry, which is thinking about climate as the new industrial revolution in America. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Kobe Weinberg.
And I'm Rachel Starr.
Together, we're the co-founders of Chicago Climate Corps, or C3. As proud Chicagoans, we're thrilled to welcome you to the inaugural Aspen Ideas Climate Chicago. C3 started as a simple idea: build a network of climate leaders dedicated to transforming Chicago and the broader Midwest into a global hub for climate action and innovation. Tonight is proof that a big idea, combined with great friends and partners, can lead to something special.
We've been fortunate to partner with the Aspen Institute to bring Aspen Ideas Climate Chicago to life. We're particularly grateful to Greg Gershuni and Kitty Pollock, who have been the most phenomenal partners and become close friends. Yes. The four of us might have the city's most active group chat. Please also please join us in thanking our incredible C3 members and steering committee whose hard work has helped make this conference possible. You can spot them by their C3 and steering committee pins. Go say hello.
The Midwest is uniquely positioned to lead on climate. We're at a crossroads of food and agriculture, clean energy, water, transportation, and finance. We have world-class universities, powerhouse corporations, committed public leadership, and a skilled workforce, assets that don't just help tackle climate challenges, but also create good jobs and stronger communities.
Aspen Ideas Climate Chicago is all about harnessing these strengths and connecting them to regional, national, and international climate goals. This week, we are lucky to be joined by community organizers, corporate executives, educators, innovators, technologists, and climate enthusiasts to forge new partnerships and accelerate climate action right here in the Midwest and across the country.
Aspen Ideas Climate Chicago is filled with thoughtful and sometimes provocative conversations that show how local solutions can drive global impact. We're grateful to all of you for being here and for supporting Chicago and the Midwest as a catalyst for climate progress.
In addition to the serious work we'll do this week, we hope you have a little fun, that you meet someone new, and maybe discover a new passion project. If you leave here with a bigger climate community and a new favorite Chicago restaurant, we'll consider it a success.
This event feels especially important right now. At a time when we're seeing climate cutbacks, it's clear that this community, our city, our region, our partners, isn't waiting around. We're proving that no matter the headwinds in Washington, climate action is an imperative that overcomes political divides.
And speaking of not waiting around, of meeting the moment head on, it is our absolute privilege to introduce someone who has done exactly that, Governor J.B. Pritzker. Since taking office, he's made Illinois a national climate leader, signing the landmark Climate and Equitable Jobs Act that commits the state to one of the most ambitious clean energy and equity goals in the nation. He's helped double our wind and solar capacity and turn Illinois into a hub for EV manufacturing and clean energy jobs.
Just this year, Illinois awarded $80 million in grants to expand an equitable clean energy workforce and secured a $500 million EV component investment that's sustaining 800 good-paying jobs. Thanks to his leadership, Illinois, and especially Chicago, has become a place where clean energy companies want to set up shop, proving that you can be both pro-business and pro-planet. And even as federal commitments have wavered, Governor Pritzker is helping to drive the national climate agenda as co-chair of the U.S. Climate Alliance alongside Cleveland Mayor Justin Bibb, working to accelerate state and local climate action across the country.
As Chicagoans and as people deeply committed to the future of our planet, we couldn't be prouder to have such a visionary, pro-environment leader guiding our state. Please join us in welcoming Governor J.B. Pritzker, and ABC News anchor Lindsay Davis.
Thank you so much to the Aspen Institute for having us. Governor, thank you so much for taking the time to have this very important conversation. 4 years ago, you signed landmark legislation committing to 100% clean energy in your state by 2050. Want to just get a progress report. Are you on track to reach that goal?
We are on track, and actually I'm really excited to let everybody know. I think that in the introduction, some reference was made to our having doubled the amount of renewable energy that we're producing in the state. We're actually on the verge of tripling the amount. And that means that we're more than 2/3, almost 70% of the energy that we produce and use in the state of Illinois is clean energy. We start out with a really great base of nuclear, which gives us a little bit of a head start, at least on the clean energy front. And then we started out way behind, if you ask me, on renewable energy, solar and wind in the state. I say started out when I came into office, and when we passed the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, we call it CEJA here, it really gave us an enormous boost. That was in the latter part of 2021, and it's taken us a couple of years. This is a brand new endeavor for the state of Illinois. It's taken us a couple of years to really turn the crank, and it is working, I think, better than many of us had hoped, and which I'm proud of. But there's still a lot of work to do. We really do. We've got legislation that's teed up. Didn't quite get it done in the legislature this last spring, but coming into the new legislature, I am committed to getting this passed, and it includes energy storage. It includes expanding the opportunity within solar and wind. And we just have, there are ways in which we can tweak the already really great CEJA bill that we passed and I signed.
1 year ago, you described combating the climate crisis as swimming up a waterfall. Since then, there are those critics who have said that the Trump administration has rolled back decades of progress when it comes to environmental protections. Is your progress for your state at risk?
It's at risk, for sure. I mean, in terms of the momentum, right? You can lessen the momentum. We're still heading in the right direction. But it's true that, you know, when the Congress takes away features of the IRA, which was an enormous boost for many of us who are already going in the right direction, it makes it harder. I mean, we've been working on expanding industry in the state that's focused on climate action, or, you know, industry that is about clean energy. Just giving an example, in 2017, Rivian took over a defunct Mitsubishi factory in Normal, Illinois. They're literally, the thousands of people who had worked there before had been fired, and that plant closed. Rivian came in, there were, when they came in, 8 employees, maybe 12, if I'm not mistaken, and now there are about 8,000 employees making electric vehicles in Normal. And suppliers, by the way. So we've been encouraging, working with Rivian, attracting the suppliers to the electric vehicle manufacturing world, to a supplier park that's next door to Rivian. And we just announced one today, a seat manufacturer that's moving to Illinois as a result of that. But I guess the point I'd make is the problems that are brought on by the current federal administration have not hindered us from doing the work that we need to do. They've made it, you know, more difficult, but the progress is still there. And I believe that the nightmare that I think many of us feel like is happening to all the progress that we're trying to make on climate action will end in 3.5 years, but we can't stop fighting hard for, you know, what we believe in.
The UN has referred to this moment as climate crunch time and has said, to our own peril, if all nations do not reduce their greenhouse gases by 42% by 2030, it's going to be catastrophic. Do you think that that's even possible if we're just talking about the United States alone reaching that goal?
I don't know whether it's possible, I'll be honest with you. I think, you know, I think many people have been screaming at the top of their lungs, rightfully so, about the necessity of climate action. I was at COP26, so that's now a couple of years in the past, and was there really talking about the progress we had made for the state of Illinois, and how it's really tied specifically and significantly to economic progress. That is to say, if you want to accelerate the endeavor on climate action, you've got to make it understandable to everybody that there are jobs and economic opportunity available to them as a result of the change in our economy. I think people hadn't come to understand that very well in years past. So when we talk about can we get there by 2030 where we need to be, the answer is the incentives have to be in place. Now, whether that's incentives from the federal government in the United States, I wish those incentives weren't being taken away. But at least at the state level, we're pushing as hard as ever. And once again, as we prove out the efficacy of creating new industries and hiring many new people in good-paying jobs, I think we're proving out the idea that you can accelerate progress even without the federal government's engagement in the United States. But again, I think I'm hopeful that we'll see a turnaround in the federal government's attitude before 2029, but certainly in 2029.
Scientists agree that in order for mitigation to be possible, there needs to be a global response. So I was just asking initially about the United States, but what do you say to those Americans who say, look, whatever we do, it doesn't matter if you have these real big polluters like China and India who are not doing their part?
China's not doing enough. China is doing something. And so, we need to keep working. Again, this has to do a lot with the conversation that goes on at the international level, and not just through the United Nations or through COP, but in the global kind of one-on-one conversations. I'm a big believer, by the way, that relationships matter in international relations. The personal relationships between leaders matter, and I think to the extent that there are people at the federal level in the United States, and again, I know we're talking internationally, but we are still the world leader. I mean, I think our power has been diminished, to be honest with you, as a result of the current administration, but I do believe we continue to have world leadership, and it needs to be part of every conversation for us to make that kind of progress. But yeah, I mean, we can't control what other countries are doing. We can only work to make incentives for them that also work for us. And I can't speak to what frankly, I can't figure out from day to day what the federal administration is going to do. It's quite a conundrum. But I do think that when even the Trump administration views something as beneficial to them politically, they'll do it. And so I think that demonstration needs to be made. It exists. I don't know why they don't see it. I think there's a lot of misinformation. But anyway, the answer is I'm concerned. If it sounds like I'm giving you a lot of words and not giving you a yes or a no, it's because I'm deeply concerned, but I'm also hopeful and optimistic that there are enough of us and there are enough voters out there that care about climate action and about the pollution that's affecting their own home communities, that they will encourage our government, which will then work on the international stage to do the right thing.
You said that you're concerned. I'm curious, and you can take this question in any direction that you'd like. What keeps you up at night?
Yeah. I slept better before January. What keeps me up at night? Look, I have a 20-year-old son, a 22-year-old daughter. Their whole lives and my whole life, I believe that our world has made progress in protecting people's freedoms, protecting their health. Technology has been beneficial. The development of technology has been beneficial to the world. So when I think about progress, right, and the arc of the moral universe, I think we've lived in pretty good times. There have been setbacks along the way, but in general, you would say, if you looked back, I'm 60 years old, if you look back from when I was born to now, generally speaking, we've moved in a good direction. So what keeps me up at night is that it feels like every day, and here we're talking about climate action, it feels like every day the things that have been making progress for so many years that, yes, there have been setbacks from year to year, here and there. I feel like we're being set back in enormous amounts, particularly in this fight for people's health, that is what climate action is about. It's about, the future of the world, but, specifically, and at least in the near term and longer term, the health of people in the United States and around the world, and their safety and their security, all of it is wrapped up in whether we are making progress on climate action. And it is disturbing to me. So I worry about my 20-year-old, my 22-year-old, and the future. I mean, I'll be around in 2030 when we're supposed to reach, some at least near-term goals. But what the world looks like in 2050 or beyond is what keeps me up at night right now, because it feels like we're undermining all the progress that we ought to be making, that we have made, and that we ought to be making, which gets me. So does it keep me up at night? Yeah. You know what it does, though? I'm up at night thinking about all the things that we all need to do and how I can inspire or help or push or or cajole or beat over the head people to react and do something about it.
Obviously, it's not a one-pronged approach, but what would you say if you had a primary focus or among your top primary focuses with regard to green tech in order to try to turn the thermostat down?
Yeah, that's a really hard question to answer, because I'm sure that if I asked everybody in the audience, almost everybody would have a slightly different answer. So I'll be frank with you. I mean, I think mostly about the state of Illinois. It's my job. But we are such a test bed for so many important things. We have on the shores of this city 20% of the world's fresh water. We are 80% of the United States' fresh water. So I worry about, what are we doing to maintain the environmental integrity of that resource. In my lifetime, we've never talked about, I say we, there are people talking about it, but I think the public wasn't talking about water as a valuable resource. It was just something that was available, and clean water available. It's not available in a lot of places in the world and in the United States now. And so the question is, what do we need to do to preserve the availability of fresh water, because that is life. So I'm not saying that's the only thing, and certainly clean air and clean water are top of mind, but the challenge of what should we focus on, we can't stop focusing on each and every one of the runoff from our agricultural industry in the state. Agriculture is a hugely important industry in the state of Illinois. Farmers want to do the right thing, and it is up to us. We talk about clean tech. It's up to us to help them find ways to grow row crops and other crops in an environmentally friendly fashion. They want to do that. We have to make sure that it's economically feasible for them to do it. So I worry about all those things, and if I'm being non-specific, it's because I feel when you're governor, you have to be a little ADD and think about 8 or 10 things all at once.
Just last week, the Trump administration said that it's going to eliminate the scientific research arm of the EPA. Yeah. As you know, a lot of that research has gone to making sure that our water, that our air is safe. You mentioned health just a little while ago. Does that open up opportunities for states, for private firms to take action?
It begins an enormous problem for the country. But does it open up an opportunity? Sure. But remember, the federal government has resources that states don't have. The federal government has resources that philanthropy can never come close to meeting. So it's problematic when they pull out of research. I mean, look what they're doing to universities, major research universities across the United States. All of the things that we care about that EPA was investing in, right, when we're in fighting climate change, they're also doing to universities. And so we are and have been since the end of World War II the #1 country in terms of research and development of, well, everything to do with climate action, but also in every other kind of technology development. And it's because the federal government got involved in funding research. And now the federal government is walking away from funding research. So if you don't think it's a problem because you don't think we have a problem with climate, then maybe you're going to start to think it's a problem when our economy falters and we become a second world, non-first world, economically leading enterprise.
Yesterday marked Donald Trump's 6th month in office for his second term. You've had some choice words for him, called him a madman, racist, homophobic, and on.
I said that?
Is there anything in particular that has surprised you about these first 6 months? I didn't think there was going to be a laugh line there.
Surprised me. I think, I don't know about everybody in the audience, but I think I've been surprised at the swiftness of the diminishment of our the future prospects for our country. Really, it's happened so quickly. The pulling back from research is one example of that, but I mean, think about the damage what are we going to do in 2029 when we have millions of people that don't have health care coverage because of what was done now? I should say tens of millions. What are we going to do in 2020? And we have to address it. What are we going to do in and what is the purpose of government, by the way, if we're not addressing these things? And this is what I don't understand what I am flummoxed. That's why I fail for words here. I'm flummoxed by the idea that we're taking away things from people. They're again, clean water, clean air, a focus on things that matter in people's lives and everyday people's lives, to give a massive tax cut to the wealthiest people in the country who don't need it. I don't, and what kind of future? Okay, you're going to create jobs. I get the idea. The idea being supply side economics, trickle down economics, right? The whole, that economic theory, which I think has failed, but that, even if you created a lot of jobs, like if you can't live in your neighborhood because the water is polluted, having a job is meaningless. You're going to lose your job. You're going to lose your health. You're going to lose your life. So there's a balance, I believe, that we all have to find in this country, and part of it is for us to get beyond what the current administration is doing.
So on the flip side, a recent poll said that the majority of Americans view the Democratic Party as too woke, too weak, and out of touch. And so I'm curious what you think the party needs to do in order to rebuild, and if you support the current Democratic leadership in Washington.
I'm laughing because you can do a poll. I can find 3 adjectives to describe the worst things that you could, or anything really, that you could say about Republicans, and you can get a poll to tell you that 80% of people in the Republican Party agree with you. You just can, and so sure, I can find some epithets and do a poll. Look, I think, here's what I think the Democratic Party, the reason I became a Democrat, first, we're the party that created Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security. We're the party that passed the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. We're the party of civil rights. These are all things, and I could list a whole bunch of other things, but these are the things that I think are fundamental values of what it is to be a Democrat. Those are the effect, right? Those are not the symptoms, but the cures that we have come up with over the years, Democrats, over many years. We still believe that the most important role that we have in government is to stand up for working families, for the most vulnerable, for the middle class, that's our job in government, and that Democrats are best equipped with ideas and a belief system that will carry that out. Do Democrats get it right all the time? No. And I think that it is as much a failure of messaging as anything else. Not suggesting that Democrats haven't gotten policies wrong, but let's not walk away from civil rights because we lost an election. Let's not walk away from health care. We haven't talked enough about civil rights. We haven't talked enough about health care. And, the Obamacare, terrific accomplishment. And then Democrats stopped talking about health care. Do you have any idea the abuses that insurance companies and pharmacy benefit managers have visited upon people that need to be corrected? I'm not suggesting you put them out of business. I'm just saying Democrats, we're about protecting people's health care and their right to health care. I'll just give you one example. I know we're nearly out of time. But I have a friend whose daughter had attempted suicide, and they found her alive and got an ambulance, and my friend was in the ambulance with her on the way to the hospital. This is in the middle of the night, and he realized, because the ambulance driver said something, that your insurance company has to give you prior authorization to check your daughter in. And so he quickly figured out how to call the insurance company in the ambulance, and they would not authorize. This is him on the way to the hospital with his daughter in the ambulance. They wouldn't authorize it. Now, he didn't know whether they ever would, but he knew he had to check his daughter in, because what are you going to do, take her home? And she needs help. She needs at least some observation and a doctor to see her. That he was able to check her in because he happened to know somebody at the hospital who was in leadership that he called and said, I'll pay you everything out of my own pocket if the insurance company doesn't cover it, but I need to check her in tonight. And that person allowed him to. That shouldn't be. By the way, he happened to have resources that he could call upon. Most people can't. 99.9% of people could not. Is it right for us to allow an insurance company to require prior authorization for that when we know that she needed help and that she probably could have ended up committing suicide, ended up dying if she wasn't checked in? We banned that in the state of Illinois. In emergency mental health situations, a an insurance company cannot deny you coverage for the first 72 hours while you're being evaluated and determine what your next steps are. We expanded that again this year. That's something we did last year. We expanded it again this year for all mental health care, not just those emergency situations. I'm telling you that because Democrats should have been on that years ago. And we should be on it every day because these are the problems that people are facing at home. And I'll give you one last example. Why are we not, the federal minimum wage is $7.25, $7.25 an hour. You cannot live on $7.25 an hour. It used to be people said, well, one person could live on $7.25 an hour, but not a whole family. Now one person can't live on, that's $14,000 a year if you work a full-time job. That is what the federal minimum wage is. It's not in Illinois. We raised it to $15. But why are Democrats not out there arguing for raising the minimum wage? Because you know what? If you ask every Republican in Congress what their belief is about the minimum wage, you'll hear two things. One is they do not think we should raise the minimum wage. And two, there's about 40% of the Republicans who would say we shouldn't have a minimum wage in the United States. Let's just let market forces determine. What a great issue for Democrats, right? We believe in raising the minimum wage. We believe that there's a standard of living, at a minimum, sustainable standard of living that everybody should, if you are working and willing to work, that you should earn so that you can take care of your family. And we don't go out and argue for those things as Democrats. We've lost our way in that regard, and it is time for us to refocus on who we are and what we have always believed in, which is, again, standing up for working families and the most vulnerable.
I'm cognizant of the time, so I'm going to make my last two questions kind of lightning round. And I'm going to piggyback off of your last answer.
Oh, sorry, that was not a question.
I'm going to piggyback off of your last answer. I know that you've recently announced that you're running for a third term. I'm not asking you if you're going to run for president, though your name has been bandied about. I'm just asking, do you think you would make a good president?
I think I've been a good governor. And I have no idea, except that I think the bar has been set pretty low.
And lastly, here at the Aspen Institute, the idea is to take great ideas and implement them as great and big ideas. For those who are really losing hope, thinking that it's too late to reverse the course of our planet, what gives you hope?
Well, I think the number of people that are here tonight, the number of people that are at this conference, the number of people that I run into in areas where people don't have time or resources to be involved in a conference like this, people will walk up to me and talk to me about how important it is that we preserve their environment, or that we conserve land, or that we focus on clean water and clean air. And the number of people, just average folks out, that gives me hope. Well, it gives me hope that there is a consensus and it is Republicans too. And that I can feel it. There is a groundswell. I don't feel like it's happened fast enough for me anyway. But that gives me hope, because we're not, maybe the country's federal administration is trying to take us backward, but the people of the United States are dead set on moving forward, in my view. And so that gives me enormous hope. And then the last thing is that we can make, the state of Illinois, I give as, the prime example of, we didn't have the kind of climate action or climate focus 10 years ago or 20 years ago that we do today. And we have accelerated it in relatively quick fashion. And so the progress you can make in short time with leadership and kind of a groundswell of support is enormous. And so it can happen anytime. It can, if we put our minds to it, we can do anything. And the state of Illinois is a leader today where we were not. And I think people were like down on the state of Illinois because nothing good was happening, it felt like, for so many years. And now, again, we have one of the best climate laws on the on the books, and we're effectuating it of any state in the country. And this is after so many years of us just ignoring it entirely. So that gives me hope. That I wake up every day thinking about the idea that if we could do it in the state of Illinois, it could happen anywhere.
Governor Pritzker, we thank you so much for the time.
All right, my name is Hillary Doe. I am the Chief Growth Officer for the state of Michigan. I'm so excited to be here today. When people think of Michigan, they might think of Motown or cars or the birthplace of the middle class. That one's my favorite. But more and more, folks are also invoking our name when they're talking about climate migration, or more and more often, as a climate haven. Now, we might be #1 in climate resilience based on a lot of measures, but I want to be very clear. That is not enough, has never been enough for us, and will not be enough for the great state of Michigan. Instead, it fundamentally misunderstands who Michiganders are as people for us to stop there. Now, this is a state of folks, right, who were the arsenal of democracy during World War II. This group of people are innovative and creative and brave and resilient, and we've got no quit. And I'm sure there's some of you out there in the audience who know exactly what I'm talking about, Michiganders. And so we don't want to be just #1 in climate resilience. We want to be #1 in climate innovation. We want to have our sleeves rolled all the way up with sharp elbows and be the tip of the spear in the fight against the climate crisis. Am I right? So what have we done? What have we done to do exactly that? We started by ensuring that we have one of the most ambitious climate plans in the nation, with a carbon neutrality goal by 2050, and then a year later we went back and set a clean energy goal for 100% clean energy by 2040, and we are well on our way. Thank you. And then we went about getting that done by ensuring that we have a fast-growing clean energy job sector. In fact, one of the top 2 fastest-growing clean energy job sectors in the country, growing at 2 times the rate of U.S. employment, pulling down federal funding and deploying more IRA-backed clean energy projects than any other state in the nation. And in 2025, when it was more important than ever for states to show leadership, we pushed forward deploying new programs, even in the face of everything, including home energy rebate programs and climate challenges, to spark innovation and attract entrepreneurs to stay in our state and come to our state to work on climate with millions in new investment. And we're just getting started. That's not to count the countless jobs and the economic investment. Truly, our climate leadership in the state of Michigan is inextricably linked to our growth strategy. They're bound together. We know that our climate goals and our leadership in this area is the thing that's going to help grow our state and attract talent and spark growth in business in our startup sector, that those things walk together. So what are we looking for? Why did we do these things? Why did we take on all those big actions? Is it because in a recent study we did alongside MIT, we found that 100% of businesses in the survey said that they were already being impacted by climate change, and 75% said they were even considering relocation as a result? Is it because our startup ecosystem is benefiting, and including a new Blue Tech Innovation Center in Traverse City and the city of Detroit as now the 2nd fastest growing startup ecosystem in the country? Is it because our population is now growing, with 66% of Michigan counties growing last year, with the city of Detroit growing in part because we saw increased manufacturing as a result of those clean energy investments? Is it because we all know talent wants to do purpose-driven work, and so we're doing whatever it takes to ensure if you have a degree in finance, you can go to Wall Street. But if you want to do purpose-driven work, there is no better place for you to do it than the great state of Michigan. Or is it because we know that our workforce is uniquely equipped for exactly this challenge, with 4 times the concentration of engineers of any other state, and with a real commitment to continued ability to make things right in the great state of Michigan. Sure, it's all those things. But the truth is that the reason our climate leadership is inextricably linked to our growth strategy is because it's the right thing to do. Because climate change is bad for everybody. Because there is no such thing as a climate haven. Really, everybody will be impacted in some way, right? And because we know that when there's a crisis, Michiganders step in and get things done. And hopefully we're getting them done alongside all of you. So that's why we're here today. And a call for partnership to work across state lines and across industry lines, and hopefully for the betterment of all our futures. So I hope you'll reach out. I hope that we'll connect and we'll lead together. Let's grow, folks. See y'all soon.
We were well into the death zone just below the summit of Mount Everest, attempting to install the highest weather station in the world, but my oxygen mask was clogged with ice, and I felt like I was suffocating. As part of the 2019 National Geographic and Rolex Perpetual Planet expedition to Mount Everest, we had navigated the notorious Khumbu icefall and its bottomless crevasses and apartment-sized hanging blocks of ice, but now I was fighting for every breath when I needed all of the oxygen I could get. So after cleaning the ice from my mask, I realized we had another major problem. The batteries needed to drill the holes in the rock to anchor the weather station were too cold to operate. We were concerned about exhausting our supplemental oxygen, so we desperately put the few batteries that we had in our armpits and next to our bodies to try to warm them up. Just as dawn was breaking, one battery came to life, and we got to work. But we faced one more obstacle. The mounts for the wind sensors had been left back in Camp 4, nearly 2,000 feet below us. I remember sitting on my pack, literally banging my head in frustration when I realized we might have a fix. If you look closely, you will see that the detachable handle from our avalanche shovel made a great substitute and added a bit more color to the station as well. We ultimately succeeded in installing the highest weather station in the world, but at a very high physical and mental cost. My British colleague Tom Matthews and I were barely able to raise our arms for the celebratory photo, while our superhuman Sherpa team members had no problem. Pimba, in the green suit there, even took a smoke break while we were waiting for the drill batteries to warm up. We installed 5 weather stations on this record-breaking expedition, one in the Sherpa community of Fortsey, one at Everest Base Camp, one at Camp 2, one at the South Col, and the highest at the balcony at over 27,000 feet. So why do we go to such extremes, suffer the hardships, and expose ourselves to these serious risks? Well, the world's supply of fresh water is in trouble as mountain snow and ice vanish. Mount Everest and high mountains in the Himalaya and the Andes and numerous other mountain ranges serve as critical water towers that sustain billions of people and countless ecosystems downstream. But we know more about the weather on Mars than the highest reaches of our own planet, leaving big gaps in scientific understanding and our ability to project future climate change impacts in some of the most vulnerable places in the world. And as the roof of the world melts and precipitation becomes ever more extreme, the probability of catastrophic flooding has also increased, threatening downstream communities, such as what happened in the Everest region of Nepal in August 2024, when a devastating glacial lake outburst flood severely damaged the Sherpa community of Tame. Weather stations are therefore critical for providing early warning from extreme precipitation and related hazards in high mountain regions. Since that initial 2019 expedition to Mount Everest, I have made 4 additional journeys back to conduct essential maintenance and build capacity to keep these stations going and extend the climate record as long as possible. I've also led teams to install similar networks on other high peaks in the Andes, including Peru's Asongate, where our team installed the highest weather station in the tropical Andes, detected microplastics in deep snow layers, and collected snow pit isotope samples to improve understanding of deeper ice core records. And Argentina's Aconcagua, the highest peak in the Americas at just under 23,000 feet, where we installed a network of 5 weather stations earlier this year, including one just below the summit that are providing critical data to monitor snow, ice, and weather in a water-limited region heavily impacted by rising temperatures and a decade-long mega drought. But there is much more work to do. Partnerships among governments, nonprofits, philanthropists, the private sector, scientists, and local communities to install and maintain weather stations elsewhere are key. Through the Perpetual Planet Initiative, National Geographic and Rolex have provided critical support for our work combining science, education, exploration, and storytelling in the Himalaya and the Andes. But these only cover a minuscule area, and there's a tremendous need to expand efforts in other vulnerable high mountain locations, including across the western US and particularly in my home state of Nevada, where major gaps exist. So please join us in making the essential investments to protect and improve the monitoring of high mountain regions. These networks are critical to sustainably manage water resources and to monitor downstream flood hazards in the face of a changing climate. Thank you.
Let's dive right in. Big picture, when you think about the ways that architecture can serve as a catalyst for both climate action and social change, what comes to mind immediately?
I think what architecture can do is really inspire people, and to do that, we really need to engage the communities where the architecture is gonna go. But it's always amazing to see when there's investment of a new building or something that's beautiful in a neighborhood. It's really makes people excited, and you know, we can couple those investments with things that are important to our environment, like near rivers or in city centers. Those are the kinds of things that I think communities can get behind.
Yeah. Talk more about where you see the greatest opportunities for architects and designers alike to lead in this space when it comes to addressing the climate crisis and building more connected communities.
Well, I think one thing is architects they can think outside of the small boundaries of a typical site, and it's really going to take that. We have to look beyond our sites to see what the bigger ecological systems are doing. Like just for example, you know, for a town that has flooding, it's important to look outside the town, upriver, to find areas that can really absorb some of that water. And it's important at the same time to work with the communities themselves to build that awareness and build that resiliency. And so I think what architects can do is connect these dots, and we like to communicate with people and envision what can be done. Put a picture on it, I guess, is the best way to say it. And it's amazing how that works to mobilize people from, you know, all backgrounds can really get together when they can see what it is, the future that they want.
Yeah, to that end, I mean, do you think that clients and cities are ready to embrace those kinds of design choices?
You know, you can see it in cities that have had disasters already. That is that's a catalyst that brings people together, sadly. But what's inspiring about that is it's possible to build back better, more resilient, and to create, you know, economic engines as well. It's just, I think when things are going super smoothly, people don't have the time to, you know, put on something like that. But when they see that there's a risk, or if they see that there's a great opportunity through, you know, these visualizations and gatherings, then I think they're ready to act.
Yeah.
I'm speaking from personal experience, just having recently been in a place where our family has a place got flooded in North Carolina, and we've been working to bring these communities together to start to prioritize what do they take on first. And there are people from all different political persuasions and backgrounds, and it's amazing to see them come together.
Yeah. So you have talked a lot about buildings as part of this broader ecosystem. How do you hope that your designs influence behaviors? So I'm curious, if there are specific design elements that you include just to subtly shift behavior, like promote walking or gathering.
Yeah. Like on a couple different scales. The first is really just like, how do you get people to interact with each other? A lot of times people are spending time on their phones and they don't even think about talking to the person right next to them. So in that space, how do you make a space that's big enough, like how far we are sitting across from each other on the sofa, where you can start a conversation, but you might not know each other, and it feels comfortable. So there's kind of a human behavior and proximity, I think. And then on this other scale, it's really like, I'm thinking of the Chicago River right here. How do you inspire people to access it, to use it, to feel like it's their own? It's almost like giving them permission to go there, and you can do that through architectural touch points and gateways. And people are curious and they want to go see this let's say a new boathouse, and then they get to the river, and then they slowly start to take on behaviors of protecting that thing that they feel is their own. So it's really important to let people feel that they are part of the process, but also that is their river, their resource, and that really starts to shift things.
I want to talk about what buildings are made of. For those of us outside of the profession, what do you think we should be asking about materials when we visit or build spaces, like especially in terms of sustainability and durability and environmental impact?
Yeah. I mean, in the past, we architects, we were focused so much on the operational energy of a building, like how much insulation there is, what kind of, heating there is in that thing. But because of the urgency of climate change, we really have to shift our focus to the embodied energy. That means exactly what you're saying, like what materials are in it. Are those materials resource heavy? Do they have to be extracted from faraway places? And so, we've been looking a lot at bio-based materials like wood that is, essentially it is embodying carbon within it. So if you put it in a building, it's sequestering it. Bio-based materials, also reusing buildings that are already there. How can they be reinvented and add capacity to those things that are already there? So really thinking about how is the building made up, and how can you reduce that energy that's in the material?
Are you describing some architectural grafting?
Yes, in fact, yes.
You've got a recent book, of course, The Art of Architectural Grafting. Tell us more about what that interesting concept is.
The art of architectural grafting, I was looking a lot at horticultural grafting and agricultural grafting, which is an ancient practice where humans interact with plants using an older rootstock and adding new scions, to bring, let's say, tastier fruit or more beautiful flowers. So this seemed like a perfect metaphor for how we can think about older buildings. How can we use that base building, but still use our creativity as architects to bring something new, to add capacity to it? And I think that's one way forward. I mean, reusing buildings saves between 50 to 70% of the embodied carbon.
Wow.
So it's really important to re-envision, how they can be used. And not just preservation, but, rethinking these buildings, using them for what they have, adding as much new capacity to them, extending their hours. This is the way we can start thinking about our existing building stock.
Something else that's important, deeply important, we know climate justice and racial equity deeply intertwined in our cities, including right here in Chicago. What is the role that you think design can play in addressing those really deep wounds?
Yeah. I think the thing, design as a process has a lot of potential to help heal these wounds, help to create a more equal society. For example, you know, by bringing people into the process, they will, and to imagine what should be in this place that maybe has had disinvestment. They are part of, you know, the solution, and then this is a way of giving agency to people that have not had that equal seat at the table. In Memphis, for example, we worked on the Tom Lee Park. It's along the Mississippi River. And we didn't come in a top-down way, like here's what we should have in this park. We engaged with, you know, youth, students, and community members and asked them what they want in the park. And then that's a way of like just, you know, making this place really feel belonging and be much more part of creating it, co-creation.
Yeah. You know, I think about the fact that you've helped truly shape the next generation of architects. What's the one piece of wisdom or maybe a challenge that you want to pass forward to that next generation?
Well, I would hope that the next generation continues to work on climate and continues to work on social equity in their work. But I really want them to not get frustrated and give up, because I have seen that, you know, some architects have said, we cannot build anymore. We've got to, you know, if they're very environmentally conscious, they're like, no more building. But all these solutions, there's many solutions that are going to come out of this creativity. So I would say keep trying to articulate the problems that you want to stress and try to imagine the future that you want to see.
When you look ahead, is there a particular project that you're working on that excites you right now? I'm really excited about opening Harvard's, well, it's in construction right now, but it'll be the first mass timber project, 100% timber building on the Harvard campus. And it's called the Tree House, and it's for conferences and meetings and exchange. So this will be a real milestone. When will that be
David
ready?
Rubenstein,
That
Tree
sounds
House.
amazing.
Yeah.
What's giving you hope right now? Whether you think about your own field or beyond when it comes to climate and the built environment?
I think there's a couple things, but one is just that there are many broad solutions that are kind of win-win. I mean, thinking of the way that polluted lands can be phytoremediated, maybe we could think about these industrial lands around Chicago as future forests for both biodiversity, but also to create these bio-based materials for the future architecture. So I think there's like, you know, thinking about a broad picture of the problems that we're facing, there might be these kind of solutions that hit on multiple points.
If you could redesign, now this is going to involve your imagination a bit, but if you could redesign one iconic building, Jeannie, anywhere in the world, just through the lens of sustainability and social impact, as we're talking about today, what would it be?
Well, the one that comes to mind first is already on the way, but McCormick Place right here in Chicago that...
Why, and what would you change first?
Well, it unfortunately, you know, had this problem of killing a lot of migratory birds that were flying along the Chicago Flyway. But they've already started to reimagine it and apply film that birds can see while people can still see out the windows.
Right.
So that is kind of starting to convert this building from something that was really detrimental to the lakefront to something that is more inert. And so
and it's working, that film.
And it's working.
Yeah.
I think they reduced the bird mortality by 95% in the latest migration.
Yeah.
So.
Jeannie, thank you so much for showing us how buildings can be bold and beautiful and deeply responsible in this world around us. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
In the summer of 1964, over 700 college students traveled to Mississippi for Freedom Summer, a campaign that helped raise Black voter registration from 7% to 60% by year's end, paving the way for the Voting Rights Act in 1965. One of the churches that played a critical role was West Camp Missionary Baptist Church, founded in 1872 in Panola County, Mississippi. Behind the church is their cemetery, where many of those quiet heroes from the civil rights era are buried, their legacies living on in the community and beyond. Now imagine, a solar energy developer arrives in town and informs the congregation that the land beneath the cemetery no longer belongs to them because much of it was never legally held in the church's name. This story is real, and unfortunately, it is not unique. Across the country, communities are waking up to renewable energy projects they didn't ask for, often on land with deep historical and cultural meaning. The Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory found community opposition to be one of the 3 leading causes of solar project cancellation. Communities are being told it's for the greater good, but to many, it feels like business as usual actions and greed. So the resistance grows. Not in my backyard, or NIMBYism, we call it. But communities aren't rejecting change, they're rejecting the kind of change that repeats harm, excludes them, and puts their survival up for negotiation. Why has the renewable energy movement, something designed to save us, become another source of harm? The truth is, we've created a false choice of renewable energy and climate solutions or community autonomy and cultural survival. But we don't have to choose. I founded Sustain Our Future Foundation to prove that. Our mission is to transform the way renewable energy projects take shape so that communities most impacted by these projects and legacy pollution can help lead and benefit from them. As an environmental health scientist, I have spent my career seeing the same pattern of working families bearing the cost of corporate progress while being shut out from its benefits. That's why we partner with renewable energy developers across the country in Wisconsin, West Virginia, Texas, Colorado, and more to create community benefit strategies that direct a portion of project profits into the hands of local residents. Here's how it works. We start by working with developers to understand and address how changes in land use, employment, or pollution exposure stemming from the projects will affect the community. Then together, we create a community benefits fund. We reach out to local community anchors like trusted leaders, churches, schools, grassroots organizations, and with them, we co-create a grant-making strategy that supports local climate resilience and economic inclusion initiatives, following the lead of the local problem solvers closest to the issues. Our community benefit funds are reparative investments that infuse justice into our renewable energy transition. These investments have supported historically Black colleges and universities to develop climate action plans, even in the face of chronic underfunding. They have helped train displaced farm workers towards new livelihoods, and they've resourced indigenous land stewards practicing nature-based carbon removal rooted in their ancestral knowledge. We don't fight NIMBYism, we listen to it, understand it, and build a bridge through it with authentic partnership. That's how we turn NIMBYs into YIMBYs, or people who say, yes, in my backyard. They do this because project development meaningfully includes them. Remember that cemetery in Panola County, Mississippi? Thankfully, the solar developer who bought that land were my dear friends at Clearloop. When they discovered the cemetery on the parcel they purchased, they did something rare. They gave it back. They ceded the land to the West Camp Missionary Baptist Church, acknowledging that any ground holding generations of loved ones rightfully belongs to those who carry their memories forward. And they didn't stop there. Clearloop made community partnerships central to their solar development. Panola County, Mississippi is now so on board with solar, they updated their county seal to feature solar panels. Now, we'll be working with Clearloop and Microsoft, their offtake partner, to deepen the benefits for this community, building on its civil rights legacy to create a more sustainable future. Because if sustainability means anything, it means legacy. It's about what we commit to today for people we may never meet. Think about those students in Mississippi in 1964. They had no guarantee their work would succeed, but they believed in a better world, and they acted anyway. Now it's our turn. Will we build a renewable energy future with communities or on top of them? So the next time you hear someone say, "Not in my backyard," I invite you to pause, listen to the realities behind those words, and ask, how can I show up differently, show up responsibly, and show up collaboratively so that they might say yes? Because that is how we win the climate fight, through better than business as usual strategies together. Thank you.
I'm so excited to have this conversation, and I'm so excited to talk about aviation. Because in the climate context, aviation and aviation fuel, I feel like, for me as a climate reporter, can be a painful thing. Because aviation is like, for me, it's the pinnacle of civilization. The ability to move large numbers of people from one place to another rapidly, overnight, or in just a few hours. It represents one of the biggest ways our world is different from the past. And it also produces an enormous amount of emissions. And not only that, but the emissions seem quite inextricably linked to the activity in a way that isn't true of cars or, I don't know, electricity, where we know how to do these things without emissions, right? We love electricity, we know how to decarbonize it. That's why I'm so excited to talk about sustainable aviation fuel and what LanzaJet is doing. So can you just give us an intro to LanzaJet as a company and your technique to produce lower carbon aviation fuel than than commercial jet fuel is right now?
First of all, I want to say it's awesome that this event is happening in Chicago. It is my hometown, and it's the hometown of our company. So grateful to the Aspen Institute for hosting this event here in Chicago. I think just to level set a little bit, commercial aviation uses 100 billion gallons of fossil jet fuel a year. That does not include private aviation, that does not include military use. So 100 billion gallons of fossil jet fuel. So for the past 80 years, we've been pulling carbon out of the ground in the form of crude oil to make fossil jet fuel. For the past 15 years, we've been working in partnership with the US government and a bunch of investors, including Microsoft, to come up with a way to use carbon available above ground to make the exact same spec jet fuel that commercial airlines need and that the military needs. So we've come up with a way that can produce jet fuel that is drop-in. You don't need to change aircraft engines. You don't need to change infrastructure. It is usable, and it's just as safe as its fossil equivalent. So our company has been at this for 15 years. We have deployed it and have the world's first SAF plant that is based in Georgia. It's in a rural economy, so we can talk about the impact something like this has on our national economy, but also very much at the local level.
Can you talk a bit about how you've achieved emissions reductions while producing a drop-in equivalent? How have you done that?
So emissions reduction are calculated on a life cycle basis. So it accounts for everything from the feedstock production to the transportation to the production of the fuel at our facility to its transportation and finally making it into the wingtip. So on average, most countries expect you to reduce that carbon footprint by at least 50%, if not 60%. And that also enables you to qualify for various incentives that might exist within a market, including in the United States.
Melanie, I want to bring you in 1 second, but first, one last question, which is, can you just talk a little bit about this facility in Georgia? I think it's a first-of-a-kind facility. Where does it stand? And just what have been the challenges, but what is it like setting up a first-of-a-kind facility for sustainable aviation fuel?
So what we're doing, I would say, and characterize as it's quite hard, right? You're developing new technology to change an 80-plus-year-old industry. You're expecting governments to do their part and support the development of a new industry. We had to work across 190-plus countries at the UN level to get alignment on how to decarbonize aviation, since it is a mobile emission, if you will.
Yeah.
And then you need capital to flow to support an industry that seems to have quite a bit of risk. So for us in developing a new technology and a first-of-a-kind plant was quite difficult. How do you de-risk it when it's the first of a kind plant? That is the de-risking activity, right? So you have to find innovative forms of capital to come in and support you. And actually Microsoft came in as an early supporter of ours and extended a loan to us for the facility to get that project off the ground. And then when you think about all that needs to come together, not just in a local economy, but from a global perspective, there's quite a bit of coordination that needs to be done. And there isn't a single person who's doing all that coordination. There's not a conductor, there's not a master puppeteer, if
Right,
you will.
there's no master puppeteer
Yeah.
of the global economy or of the domestic climate economy, for that matter.
Yeah.
Melanie, aviation is often described as a hard to decarbonize sector. It's often categorized as a hard to decarbonize sector. So why did Microsoft get involved in such a challenging sector? And also, like, why is Microsoft involved in aviation in the first place, given that last time I checked, there's not Microsoft planes flying around the air?
That is true, and it's a great question. And thank you all for being here. What a great place to be in, especially in Chicago. So it's a great question because when it comes to Microsoft, one of the key things that we did back in 2020 was set a really ambitious goal around sustainability to be carbon negative, water positive, zero waste, and to protect land, all by 2030. And if we want to take a very carbon-centric view and just focus in on carbon for the moment, to be carbon negative involves basically three things. First, you have to reduce as much as we can throughout our operations. We have to work with our supply chain to ensure that they reduce their emissions as well. And then thirdly, we have to remove the remainder. And this is really where we started looking at where do all the emissions come from that Microsoft reports out every year. And of course, we have our direct emissions. But an interesting fact is that 97% of what Microsoft reports out every year from our carbon footprint actually comes from our value chain, our supply chain. And we took a closer look at data because we do like data. You can break that down into 4 categories. The first is building materials, which the earlier panel just talked about. The second category is fuels, to move our products, to move our people, to move things to and from our data centers, as well as our devices. Every Xboxer out there, you got it somehow, and you probably got it using using fuel. The third key area is in indirect procurement, what our suppliers do. And the fourth key area is chips, the things you put into data centers. So if you boil it down to those 4 categories, we had to then put in place strategies across each of those wedges to make reductions. And when it came to fuels, that's where sustainable aviation fuel came into play. Because as you described it, yes, it's a hard to abate, but I like to call it a need to abate sector, particularly for companies that are trying to reduce their value chain emissions. And what's so great about sustainable aviation fuel is that it exists.
I want to get to that in a second, but first, can you just, when Microsoft is making sustainability decisions, it seems like it's not easy to go out and buy a solar farm anymore, especially of the size and scale that Microsoft and other large technology companies need at this point. But we know how to do a solar farm, and we know how to do solar and storage. We know how to do wind. We're still on a first-of-a-kind facility for sustainable aviation fuel. So what's Microsoft's role so early in the technological life cycle of SAF?
So taking a look at history, you mentioned clean energy. The tech sector and many companies played a pivotal role in actually growing the market for clean energy development deployment. And the tool they used was something called power purchase agreements. It was a way for companies to signal the demand that they are going to need, and it helped banks finance the supply to come online and bring it down the cost curve to actually be something where we see today, where it's one of the largest growing resources onto our grids in the last several years and continues to grow. So then you take that same model, and then the next came up with SAF, which was we know we need, there's demand being signaled both here in the United States and in Europe and around the world for more supply of SAF, but then you also need the financial innovation and the tools, as Jimmy described, to actually scale this market. And that's where Microsoft comes into play. We're not just a buyer of SAF, but we also want to be able to be a market creator and to help support the acceleration of a market like first-of-a-kind projects. And the way we did that in the case of Microsoft was back in 2020, we set these goals, but we also started to see there were so many innovations that existed in 2020, but were not yet commercially viable and at scale, so that when 2030 clicks into gear, we're able to hit those carbon negative goals. LanzaJet is one of the examples where we saw, look, if we can make this commercially viable and successful, that by 2030 you have enough of this SAF flowing, not only do we get closer to meeting our targets, but so many of our suppliers and partners can reach their goals too.
what's the benefit of having Microsoft as a partner? I mean, how would you even describe the relationship between LanzaJet and Microsoft? Because it seems quite multifaceted, but it also seems important in, I work at an organization called Heatmap News. We cover what we call the new climate economy, kind of everything from solar and storage to new climate tech companies. And one thing we hear a lot from the climate tech companies we cover is the need for offtake, is the need for infrastructure-grade finance, is the need for, there's so many, the American financial system is great at venture. It's great at kind of expensive capital that's going to be available for the next, that's going to get you to market in the next 10 years. And it's great at bankability. It's great at, you go into the bank, you have a business loan. But for anything that's like a first-of-a-kind factory or a big, physical investment that's going to pay off over 30 years, we're not there yet as an American financial system, or at least we don't have all the tools that we might need. So just what are the benefits of having Microsoft as a partner here?
So I think what I would say is we're trying to do something pretty big.
Yeah.
Right? Not just in the United States, but in places like Australia and Kazakhstan, to Japan and the UK. You can't do that alone, right, at the end of the day. We took an approach from our very early founding to work through partnerships. And if you look at who's invested in our company, it actually is nearly the entire value chain. So we have one of the Japanese largest trading houses, Mitsui. You have Japan's largest bank, MUFG. You have Microsoft that has been on our journey for 4 years at this point. You've got airlines like British Airways and Southwest Airlines. You've got Airbus and Group ADP that manages airports. We took the initiative to pull together investors that are like-minded, that are going to be on the journey alongside us. Doing anything for the first time is hard. There's lots of ups and downs. You need partners that are going to be on that journey with you, who understand the complexities of it, and who will be by your side, right, if you will, as you progress. Microsoft, for us, is a multifaceted relationship. Not only have they helped us with the loan at the plant in Georgia, they've invested in our company. We are providing renewable diesel once we're in production to hopefully power your backup data centers and the backup generators for those data centers. And as well as have Microsoft participate in these SAF certificates. So having companies participate in that offsetting of the premium attached to sustainable fuel is very important. And Microsoft plays a role across all 4 of those facets, including SAF-Cs.
How do these SAF certificates work? Is it we talk about pay for difference contract. I mean, how does it once the facility is set up and you're producing SAF, is this going to be that if a Microsoft employee is getting on a plane that you're mailing, you're shipping SAF specifically, probably to SeaTac to fly the plane? How does a contract of this type work?
So I think what I would say is the SAF certificate market is still developing. So there's different mechanisms. Ensuring the integrity and the transparency of that is going to be super important. But generally, when we produce a sustainable fuel, we achieve a 70–80% reduction on a life cycle basis of greenhouse gas emissions. We can monetize, if you will, that reduction by selling a SAF certificate to a corporate like Microsoft, who then uses that to reduce its overall carbon footprint, right, and achieve their ambitions as well.
And we attach it to where we get those emissions from. So in this case, it'll be business travel or the movement of our devices, and it shows up there in that ledger. And what makes this type of tool so important, and where you see it, whether it's in the clean energy market in here, or even expanding into other sectors like steel or concrete, is that when things are geographically difficult to access, it allows for those markets to still be constrained, to basically grow and not be constrained. So you're not limited by the geography of where the Georgia facility is. You're able to actually be able to invest and secure those type of emission reductions. Another key part of it is it allows our suppliers who also want to participate in the market, they can also access platforms that allow them to access these certificates, so they can then use it for applying to whatever that is that they're selling or we're using from them. So it's just another vehicle to help actually grow that space where you don't necessarily need to own airplanes or have your own jets, but rather it's a way to actually help continue to scale that marketplace. And it's the start of what I hope to see is more in the future in multiple sectors into this need to abate area.
In other words, is there SAF, maybe not in the United States, or maybe in the United States, is there SAF in the jet fuel commodity, I don't know, the big jet fuel commodity cycle in the sky right now? Like if I fly out of an airport somewhere in the US, is there a tiny bit of SAF somewhere in the fuel mix? Is that true in the US? Is that true abroad?
So yes. So I think as a global industry, we produced about 400 million gallons of SAF last year. So if you compare that to the denominator of 100 billion gallons, it is a very small percentage, right? So we have a long ways to go. And if you think about the US market, in the prior administration, there was an ambition that was set to achieve 3 billion gallons of SAF production by 2030. And that's about 10% of the expected fossil jet fuel use in 2030. Other countries have had similar ambitions, 10% by 2030. As an industry, we have agreed to net zero by 2050. In fact, I think it's the first industry that has agreed to that on a global basis.
You mean in aviation?
In aviation, yeah. So all the airlines, all the airplane manufacturers, the engine manufacturers have all come to agreement on how to decarbonize. SAF is 70% of the solution to get to net zero, right? So the ambition is there. The question is, how fast can we get there? How fast can we scale up technologies like ours to produce the fuels? And how do we align all of those aspects in that ecosystem that's required to enable the urgency, right, that we see in terms of decarbonization?
What's the current policy landscape for sustainable aviation fuel in the US right now? Because as you mentioned, there was a big Biden goal around it. I think the Inflation Reduction Act offered some tax credits, but the Republican reconciliation bill also just altered some of them further, perhaps. So what's the current policy situation?
It's complex. So we actually, the big, beautiful bill actually was positive for us in some ways, right? So we have an extension to the SAF tax credit for a couple more years, so that's a positive. The value was reduced, so that is a negative. But that actually takes us back to the state of Illinois. Having Governor Pritzker up on stage was great for me to see. The governor was one of the first movers to create a state-level tax credit for SAF. There is a $1.50 tax credit available for SAF that's used and uplifted in Illinois. So where there's a deficit at the federal level, you can see states stepping in to help provide a framework that is helpful to us to build more plants.
Melanie, you hinted at it a little, but what are other industries where you think could benefit, so-called hard to decarbonize industries that could benefit from this kind of, I want to call it an all-of-the-above approach, but a more flexible approach where a larger company is working in a number of different ways with a startup or early-stage company?
I definitely think building materials is the next big area for opportunity investment. One, because much like with LanzaJet, there are really exciting, innovative companies already out there that are scaling, receiving investment. Back in 2020, we announced a Climate Innovation Fund. It's our $1 billion commitment to invest in the underfunded markets and many of these innovative technology solutions that are not yet quite commercially viable or yet at scale. And so through that, we've been exposed and we got to see so many really great companies that are sort of, I'd say, where LanzaJet was 4 years ago. And with that kind of investment and this type of strategy and these types of innovative tools, you're finally bringing what I would consider a very positive flywheel together between the policy support that is happening globally, the innovative technology, and then the financing that's innovative to really help scale and help all these other markets take off.
Well, I think that was a perfect way to look for the future. Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for having us.
We are so honored to be representing the fashion industry here at this conference. And we're hoping that we end our evening with some creativity and some hope. Does that sound good to you guys? Yes. I am a senior staff writer at Fast Company magazine where I write about the fashion industry, and I'm so happy to be here with Cameron Russell. She is a model, an activist, and the author of a wonderful book called How to Make Yourself Agreeable to Everyone. And so to start with, I've been a fashion writer who has written about sustainability for 11 years, and so I'm deeply immersed in this world. But when I go to cocktail parties and I talk about writing about sustainability in fashion, people often look at me quizzically because they don't understand that the fashion industry is a polluter and is contributing to the climate crisis. So Cameron, as you began your career as a model, when did it occur to you that you were in an industry that was actually part of the problem?
Thank you so much, Liz, and it's such a pleasure to be here with you, my friend. And thank you all for sitting through all of these plenaries and being at a climate change conference when this is such a hard work to be in and such a time that is so filled with grief and with setbacks. So I appreciate so much everyone's energy to be in the room. I always knew that fashion was questionable as an industry, in part because I was raised by a mom who is not a consumerist at all. We only ever went to the Goodwill. She told me consumerism was bad when I was like 4. I knew that word. I actually, once I started to work, it is a question, why is there so much money and so much profit flowing into this industry? And I want to read just a paragraph from this book because it's really hard to make sense of the data, and I made an effort to do that here. An EPA report finds a 1,000% increase since 1960 in clothing sent to landfills annually. The numbers are so high, it's hard to make sense of them. In 2018, nearly 34 billion pounds of textile waste end up in the garbage in the United States. So I divide by population, 100 pounds per person. An average load of laundry is 15. That is 7 loads of laundry per person per year trashed. But this math distorts the responsibility. It ignores the billions spent advertising to drum up demand for unnecessary products and the fact that these brands overproduce, constantly discarding unsold garments as they introduce new trends weekly. And the way that they produce that much is by paying estimates around 70 million women less than a livable wage and by polluting constantly. And I think the real, what fashion has normalized is disposability and made that something that we aspire to, which is devastating.
And it's so interesting, in the book you talk about disposability on every dimension, not just in terms of the actual clothes, but the people in the industry. And I think that's a really important thing to remember, that when we're talking about this climate crisis and fashion's impact on the climate, there's this kind of larger framework of disposability. And so I think it's so interesting that you've spent 16 years organizing. So you've been a model for 25 years, 16 of those years you've been organizing, and you've sort of evolved over the years in terms of how you've gone about this process. So tell us a little bit about that whole journey that you took.
Okay, I have some slides to entertain you. So this is the first sort of effort at organizing we made. This is before the COP in Copenhagen, so that's 16 years ago. And we thought, if we can sell anything, why can't we sell climate action and explain what carbon parts per million are and how many we need to shed by having a striptease?
Because to be fair, it's confusing, right? People need to understand what this is all about.
Quickly after that, we realized that we were much more than that superficial thing that the industry was telling us was important. And so when we started, a lot of people, I had a lot of feedback just from friends and people I'd meet, like, you cannot organize in fashion. What are you talking about? These are poorly educated, often non-English speakers. They're very young. Everybody is selfish and competitive, and there's too much for them to lose. And the reality could not be more opposite. And when we saw each other, and this is from a story slam night that we had, where people talked about climate change and how it was affecting where they were from, and what they knew about climate change and what they knew that we could do when we came together. And organizing with models and really seeing that we were leaderful just made me into a lifelong organizer. I think this is our solution. Our solution is to look to the person next to us, and it doesn't matter who they are. If they're a 16-year-old model, if they're your neighbor, see them as a leader. We do not know who is going to be the brave one. We do not know who knows how to care and shelter and cook for people when there's a crisis. We don't know who's going to get on the bicycle when we need to go out. We don't know who's going to be able to make the splint. Any situation, we don't know. We need to be flexible and improvisational. And so that 16 years just reinforced to me that that is how we make it through, is really by seeing each other.
One of the most interesting parts of your book to me was when you recounted the history of labor organizing. And I think it's so interesting at this moment in time when we're really thinking about the class dynamics in this country and how workers are being crushed. I mean, this is a big part of the political conversation that we're having right now. But actually, when you think about the history of labor organizing, women have been crucial to developing a lot of the infrastructure we have for organizing today. And actually, a lot of those women were working in the fashion industry. And this is actually something I didn't know until I read your book. So tell us a little bit about that, or maybe read a passage for us.
Yeah. So the story of the fashion industry, the shared story is that behind the curtain, there are vulnerable women and powerful men, extractive business practiced by greedy corporations, and girls who know how to argue we're empowered by objectification. We need to change this story that's widely accepted. William Shepard wrote one of the most poetic and grotesque eyewitness accounts of the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, which killed 146 garment workers, mostly young women, many of whom jumped to their deaths to escape, whose bosses said they had locked the doors of the factory to prevent theft. He wrote, "The first 10 thud deads shocked me. I looked up and I saw there were scores of girls at the windows. The flames from the floor below were beating in their faces. I even watched one girl falling, waving her arms, trying to keep her body upright until the very instant she struck the sidewalk. She was trying to balance herself. Then came the thud, then a silent, unmoving pile of clothing and twisted, broken limbs. As I reached the scene of the fire, a cloud of smoke hung over the building. I looked up to the 7th floor. There was a living picture in each window, 4 screaming heads of girls waving their arms." This haunting, two-dimensional living picture captures these young women as perpetually helpless victims in moments before their death, yet all of their names are known. Starting with Lizzie Adler, 24, Anna Altman, 16, Anina Ardito, 25, to multiple burn scenes, Essie, 19, Jacob, 38, Morris, 19, to young Ida Brodsky, 15, to Kate Leone, 14, and all the way to the end of the alphabetized necrology, Sonia Wysotsky, 17. Their stories are known, and the testimonies of their coworkers who survived are recorded. They had organized and gone on strike for better conditions a year earlier, and in the wake of their deaths, worker protections were finally passed as part of the New Deal. Their work had been preceded by the organizing efforts of the teenage Lowell Mill Girls, who formed one of the first labor unions in the United States, and who were also inextricably linked to enslaved Americans. As mill girl Lucy Larkham wrote, "When I've thought, what soil the cotton plant we weave is rooted in, what waters it, the blood of souls in bondage, I have felt that I was sinning, to stay and turn the accursed fiber into cloth." And it is a centuries-long fight for freedom by those enslaved, forced to work in cotton fields, and their descendants that makes possible so many of the democratic rights we enjoy today. And all of this is no less true than the living picture Girls in Peril, but somehow that makes for easier poetry. I suspect because so much of our culture is organized around villains and victims, climaxes and perfect girls, and not the slow, everyday work of making a livable world. A friend emails me to ask if I can speak at their fashion activism lecture series and say something that focuses on tangible ways that people can be part of the solution, not just reiterating the same depressing facts. And we cannot escape perpetuating the industry's violence if we do not find words for it. But then again, I feel I erased 20 years of who I've been by articulating that violence. So visceral, it's hard to remember anything else. The way we organize, the way we can make beautiful images of a future worth pulling closer, the way fashion can be such a powerful form of expression, the way people laboring inside this extractive industry have a long history of making powerful change. And so I put some images together to show you of what some of that imagery looks like to me. This is before the COP in Paris. I convinced Vogue to run a story of all the women going into the Paris Agreement. This is a cover of Porter magazine. If you look at fashion magazines, you know they love a cover of a single person. And so in every move, I try to challenge that and share that we are powerful as a collective. And this is a story about sustainable fashion workers who are also caregivers and how that informs their work. This is a campaign we shot for Custom Collaborative with the Model Mafia, a group of a couple hundred models we organize in New York and in Paris and in London. And Custom Collaborative trains low and no income women of color who are immigrants in sustainable fashion to become entrepreneurs.
I often wonder as a reporter why the fashion industry is so dismissed when we think about the big problematic industries of the world. You know, there's a there are people in government who are focused on the auto industry and other major polluters, but there is no fashion czar. And so I hope that if you are sitting here tonight and you haven't given much thought to the fashion industry, you'll think both about the enormous negative impact that it has, but also all of the people who are working within it who are doing really important work to make the world a better place. Talking to you is always so hopeful, and I'm so grateful that we're able to do it on this stage this evening. But as we leave, I'd love to hear what is one thing that's giving you hope today.
I feel that I am not having an easy time accessing hope, but I am finding ways to stay grounded and look towards people who know how to move through this time. So the last pictures that I want to share is from a project that I've been working on for 3 years with my collaborator, May Tao. It's a project called The Art of Care, and it started by photographing my grandmother. 3 years ago, she was a prolific artist. Her neighbor used to say, if you spend too much time at Miss Shirley's house, she'll paint you, and that was true. When she passed, I found a resume of hers, and she had 6 children. She listed their ages. She talked about working as a home health aide. Nowhere did she mention that she was an artist, and it got us thinking about how art, the art of caregiving, is so invisible. We don't see it in galleries. It's for our families. And most recently, we took this project to Arizona, and this is Lika, the founder of Casa de la Misericordia, and she is an artist, a prolific artist. They have a ukulele shop, a fiber arts shop, and she's a painter and a poet, and she saw lots of families in the cemeteries at the border in Mexico, and they were homeless because shelters kicked them out after 3 nights. And she said, what if we build a place, a sanctuary, where we can live for as long as we want? We don't kick people out, and we don't turn people away. So during the pandemic, they had 300 people on the floors, and she had that imagination of an artist, that we can all belong, that we can shelter everybody, and then she made it real. And so it's leadership like that that is helping me know how to move in this time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And thank you all for being here. And thank you to the Aspen Institute for putting together such a wonderful event. Thank you.